I don't know what the excuse for doing this is, but some time back, if you recall, when I was handed a note at the beginning of a meeting, I read that which didn't seem to strike many metaphorical or symbolic chords in any of you, but you remember it was like a note somebody gave me that was something like good news and bad news, and the good news was that John Milton lives, and the bad news was he's still writing. Well, hell, it didn't get that kind of... Well, since then, there was kind of another one. And based upon the questionable success of the first one, I didn't really repeat it to all of you, but I mentioned it to a few people to see. And the other one was kind of good news and bad news that Lord Byron lives. And the bad news is he went back just presently to Rome, and he's more pissed than ever. And based upon the reaction this got with a few private tellings, I thought maybe I should just go ahead and just get it out, and maybe we'll all feel better for it, and say there's like, all right, news, and then some additional news. And it's like Milton and Byron are both alive, and they're doing a book together. Oh, and one more. And you're going to have to read it. Well, I hope we've heard the last of that. Continuing along. Onward, outward, and upward with our survey regarding, at least in the secondary world, if you recall, how only the unnecessary is criticized. You recall we're doing the 1, 2, 3, and A, B, C, D, and all that. But before going any particular further, where we had more or less stopped, is look at the partner of this, which is not simply a reversal of it, but it's its own separate operation. And to state it that only the unnecessary must be defended. And if you will listen for a second, I think you'll see it is not simply the verbal, literal, polarized other side of saying, well, only the unnecessary is criticized. It is a whole nother operation, and I could have called it something else, but just let's anyway take off from there. That only the unnecessary must be defended. We're talking about the secondary world, remember. Man's invented, in a sense, with no negative connotation to the description, but the secondary world being man's intellectual invention. That is, in this world, it is only the unnecessary which must be defended. Again, note, since we've changed it, the descriptions a little bit, that there is no extant defense of the primary world. This is because in the primary world, at the primary level, reality is its own justification. There have been religious, philosophical, and all sorts of silly attempts to... people have been struck, that is, life has let little stray, anomalous lightning hit people in their gooey place, and them think, ooh, what is, is. What is here must be serving a purpose. What is here must have some raison d'etre. And of course, a lot of them then have to go to a dentist so they can learn how to say d'etre. Of course, it's cheaper just to have an operation and have yourself made French than it is to try and pronounce it. But that's another story. They may ask me not to talk about such matters. And in return, they agreed not to talk about us. Which is probably a bargain. At any rate, it's worth just another second for you to, so that you could think about it on your own. But you've got to take it at the absolute ground level, which is the garden level, which is the dirt level, which is the soil level. It is the primary world from which everything else must grow. At that level, reality is its own justification. Of course, at that level, there is no justification of reality. At that level, it does not speak, even through man. it is its own justification. And so looked at from many ways, which we were mentioning last time. You and I were discussing about how the primary world is not criticized, and looked at another way, the primary world, that level of basic reality, does not need to be defended. In what way would you ever have to defend eating? It's not criticized, as we were pointing out, not overeating, eating, for instance. Staying alive. There's no need to defend it. There is no sane, extant defense. No one has to justify being alive. If they do, they are seriously playing on the anomaly team. They are not part of the mainstream of life. They are not part of the health of life. There is no defense necessary for reality at the primary level. But then you move into that level which you must move into, which all of humanity, more or less for our sake of discussion on this planet at this time, that all of humanity now is partly, individually and certainly collectively, is partly in bloom. That is, all humans have little sprigs and buds coming above the soil line, that is, above the primary level, and they have at least a burgeoning intellect. And so there is a secondary world going on. It is not, in and of itself, its own justification. Not because I say so. We're talking about the observation, this kind of impertinent survey that the ordinary mind does not make, and that is simply look upon the secondary world. As much time, the secondary world is, one operational synonym for the secondary world is the world of talk. There is as much, casually speaking, there's as much time spent in this world of talk defending the world of talk as there is the talk. You all know that, so you knew that. As soon as I say it, you went, I was going to think that myself. At the ordinary level, if there's X amount of an ordinary man's, just an ordinary, you and everybody else at the ordinary level, just an ordinary, sane, sophisticated, civilized person, if they spend X hours of their life or X percent of their life talking, then X over 2 is spent in justifying that talk. And please expand justify, not in some crude elementary sense that you're trying to rationalize, as most people say. Justify is like it is a continual running parallel explanation, defense. And this is not an attack. Advertisement. It is not dissimilar to what we have pointed out of how much time now in the media world of television, like news programs and everything else, is spent. If a news program spends 30 minutes giving the news, nowadays they're up to close to 15 minutes of promoting what's coming up after this break. Stay tuned. And so half of what is being done is not what's being done. It is like a running commentary. That is a running justification. That the world of talk is half composed of something other than, if we looked at talk, as being some form of movement of information, movement of data, etc. Then half of the energy, I'm saying time, but it's the same thing, half of the time spent, half of the energy spent in this movement of what seems to be information. That, yes, I have something to say, and here it is. And you say it, you and everyone else. And collectively and then individually, half of the time, half of the energy, half of the effort spent to move this information is spent what? In a sense, in the media itself, in the communication itself, in talk justifying itself. One more time, don't take justifying in that connotative sense that is very often used as an attack. By saying, well, you're just trying to justify that kind of parlor psychological jargon. It's not that. It is simply a running kind of parallel commentary that talk is making about itself, to explain itself, to introduce itself, to expand upon what it meant, to advertise what it's going to do later, to back up and point out what it just did. You understand? It's half of the dance steps are spent with 1 foot off the floor. While the primary world, at that level of reality, is its own silent, it is by its own nature, its own justification. It's why it does not have to say anything. It's why your need to eat, it's why humanity's need to eat. The need for sex, the need for staying alive, which is, to wrap it up succinctly, that need, that primary world, that reality, has no need to justify itself, which is just almost choking it for me to even say has no, it just does not do it. You can surely see the folly. It's even semi-folly, Pogita folly, for me to even point it out, but what the hell. They can't sue me, I'm not union. It is its own justification. Now you see that. Comma. Withal, the secondary world, being in a quite real sense, always remembering that man is working for life, but in where life is moving through man, but withal, the secondary world, the intellectual world, the singular world of man, man must continually, he must defend it, his world. He must validate it. He must excuse it. He must explain it. Constantly. It is, in a sense, a kind of legal family matter. It is like man is charged with the responsibility of defending the secondary world because it is his child. It is his invention. And as we were noting a few nights ago, if you recall, the intellectual secondary world must, in a quite real sense, tied to the need for uncertainty of it being the only sign of life, that the secondary intellectual world is must continually reinvent itself. And parallel to that is that man must forever be its apologist. Again, in the broadest sense of apologist, like justification, this is not any sort of negative reflection or critique. It is just this parallel running that as the secondary intellectual world of man, through man, by man, must continually reinvent itself. It's why it must be uncertain, that it has to continually keep moving, whereas the primary world does not reinvent itself. As far as you can see now, as far as is operationally useful to talk about, sex needs no improvement. Eating needs no improvement. Staying alive, to wrap it up again, staying alive, you're either alive or not. If you're alive, how are you going to improve on it? If you're full, if you have eaten proper food to you at the time, you got all the nourishments, you got everything that you needed then, how can you improve on it? There's nothing else to say. Eating does not have to reinvent itself. Sex does not have to reinvent itself. Staying within the range of a tolerable, healthy body temperature and external temperature of the environment, how does it need to be reinvented? How are you going to improve on something that is? How are you going to improve on that which is, by its own existence, its own justification? The secondary world is not true. It would die. We've been through this. And so as it continues to reinvent itself, I just want you to see there is like a voiceover. It is like a running parallel to it, a corollary, that as it must continually reinvent itself, man must also forever. Man must continually be there and be its apologist, be its translator. It must justify it. It must explain it. It must validate it to itself, to other people. There is another little note that we've hit once or twice in passing, but it bears upon everyday existence. It's a slightly different view of it. Is once you understand that man's responsibility in defending, that his responsibility in this is in defending the secondary world, which is, by its very essence, is his invention. And so from one ordinary view, you could call it illusionary. I'm not going to get tied up in that kind of old... But you know that all sorts of would-be mystical systems and philosophies have said, well, the world's an illusion. And it was based on some reality again. very crude, but what they were saying is the secondary world is not real in the same sense as the primary world. But it's just a hobby. It's just a hindrance in life. But in one real sense, relatively speaking, the secondary world is, relatively speaking, unstable, illusionary, and invention compared to the primary world. Once you understand that, without there being any sort of qualitative judgment involved, once you understand that, then you also understand something else that is a part of everyday existence and historical existence. You understand, since man is charged with the responsibility of defending this thing that is an invention, that in a sense is illusionary, once you understand that, then you can understand the ferociousness with which he oftentimes defends it. Aha. Well, in fact, there's a tale over in one reality. The tale tells that Mary was once told that the lamb is illusionary and that Mary killed the one who told her. No. All you got to do is look at history books. All you got to do is look at historical genes in you. It is the ferociousness with which, let's still call it a tale. That sounds too serious. That sounds almost like an austere suitcase. Just a tale, kind of myth, that creatures in some places, if they're having to defend that which is their imagination, will do it with a vigor, will do it with a fiendishness not otherwise applicable to real stuff. Yeah, that's weird. Boy, I'm glad you said that was over in some other place. Pardon me. Yes, sir. Some other place. Yes, sir. A real myth. Is that enough dramatics? We've been through this, but again, right quick, because it's not to prove something in a historical or sociological sense, because you are a part of the kind of media through which this still flows. But looked at historically, always easier to start out apparently looking out there, look at the ferociousness with which people will justify, just ordinary people now, defend the secondary world compared to the primary world. The more civilized you are in a sense, the more you are inclined, especially collectively, to do grave, horrendous, horrific harm to your neighboring kingdom, your neighboring man, over ideas as opposed to territory. And the neighboring state start encroaching and moving over the fence from one kingdom to another, just one day just suddenly move over and you realize, well, they've taken 4 or 5 acres here of our property. Now you can talk about it, you can tell them, get out. You may end up in some kind of conflict, but notice historically, that sort of thing is not inclined, is not proven to be normally a source of such blood-curdling, almost inhumane conflict as it is once they begin to fight over non-tangibles. Religion, politics, economics. Economics, as a science, as a discipline. Not fighting over that they stole some of your corn, but fighting over ideas. Having to defend that which, I'll make it crude then, surely you got it though, any of you who are going to get it. Having to defend that in a sense that doesn't exist is prone to make one's blood boil and one just become fanatic. Think about it. Just from a very, all right, I'll say it, a skewed view. I mean, if life put you in charge that, hey, I've got this real neat CD collection over here, or I do, in fact, have a 52 round, but it's in good shape, and I want you to guard it for me. That's your job in life. And I'll take care of you. I'll see that they'll bring you some food, and every now and then shoot a woman by for you, or a Pee Wee Herman curling book or something. But you stay there. Your job is to guard that. And let's say you take it seriously, which by God you better if life said that's your job. But think about it. What you would do, and there's Well, you just do all you had to, right? You do all that which was physically possible and reasonable. But there is something else again when life puts people in charge of defending. Look, what I want you to do is defend this religious idea. And of course, at that level, it being uncertain and in a sense imaginary, but at that level, ordinary people go, oh yes. I mean, an ordinary person does not say that, well, religion's just imagination. Or it could be political truths. I want you to defend the republic way of life. I want you to defend the democratic way of life, the Whig way of life. I want you to defend the Marxist system. Anyway, an idea. And life tells you your job is to defend this. And in one real sense, life has said, what I want you to do is defend this imaginary car I have over here, this imaginary playmate, this imaginary collection. You go, okay. Now remember, you're defending something. Your job, life has appointed you. You are in charge. Yes? You are in charge of defending, and he names it. Of course, life has named it through other people. That's the collective thought of man, which is accepted. It says, I want you to defend the religious truth. The truth of, and of course it's always going to be something specific, the truth of Islam. The truth of the Italian way of life. You say, yes, sir. And in a sense that has no bearing on intellectual, at the city level, intellectual wherewithal, just put crudely again, humans know there is no such thing. Oh, I know they don't know it, so don't write me. But they know it. They know this. Anybody, all the way from a theologian to a body and fender man, they all know that there is some kind of difference between an automobile, even a Rambler. There is a difference between an automobile and God. All right? Or between an automobile and a religion. Even the religion. Well, what are you, sir? I'm a Catholic. All right. The religion. They know there is a difference. Forget what. They know there is a difference between a car and religion. All right? What I'm telling you is they also know religion ain't the same thing as a car. We just said that. All right? Compared to a car, religion doesn't exist. You know what I mean. Do you understand? Can you catch, without me staying here any longer, there is a kind of very interesting ferocity with which people will defend that which they know is not real as opposed to something else. And when I said, I was trying to get you to see again, that once you understand that, you can understand the ferocity that man oftentimes exercises in the defense of these illusionary goals, objects, ideas. I say that not only as suggesting it can be a personal use, but the collective thought of man continues to look historically and wring their collective hands and bemoan their age so that they can appear to be a sage. Bemoaning their age about how can we be so stupid? They were saying that in 0 AD. They were saying that in 1500, just before the Middle Ages, you remember, rolled over and didn't even cough, and a lot of people rolled under. They did it then, they're doing it today, which is what? All right. They're bemoaning their saying. Is it going to get more confusing? They say that it continues to be proof that man is no good, that man is regressing. We're just going to have to do it fast. I'm going to have to turn it inside and out in one sentence. Well, tell me something new. The ordinary mind, everybody's, the ordinary mind can say, we are not progressing. Life is not going uphill, and here's proof of it, right where I'm talking. Here's proof of it. And it could use what I was about to say and what I've already hinted at in the last 90 seconds. Back at me. I'm using now ordinary, I'm speaking for ordinary intelligence. It would say, all right, what you started to say, Roman times, the Middle Ages, Men were killing each other. The Inquisition. The Romans throwing those poor Christians out like they were burnt toast to the lions. Men were killing each other over what? Not property, not slaves, not corn, over ideas. It's insane. We've had 2,000 years, and what's happening? There are people killing each other right as we speak over ideas. I'm still speaking for ordinary intelligence. How can you say that things are all right? We haven't. In fact, they've got to be worse because we've had 2,000 years and we're still killing each other over insanity. That is religion, differing political philosophies. Inside out, as much as possible, right quick. That is not proof. Well, it's proof. It's not proof of what they think. Do you see? It all makes sense at that level. I could take that position. I could defend it. I just made it up. I just spoke for it. But contrary, as much as you can go contrary in a polarized world, the fact that people still continue to do that is proof not of ill health, but of robust health. Because in one sense, for 2,000 years, it's easy just to take the time segment that I use, the time frame of AD up until now. Look, humanity is still growing and getting, at least it still is healthy, all right? At least it still is healthy, and it's chewing the same food. You think that's not good? You can't do it. Of course, that's not the end of it. There's more, but even looked at the minimal level. Rather than saying, well, men are still fighting over that which does not exist. Men are still fighting over the illusionary. You should be going, thank God. Not that it's necessary, but rather than saying, well, boy, that just shows that we're still el stupidos. It just shows how healthy the patient is. In fact, it's not even a patient. The only patients are those that go, life must be sick. Yeah. Well, even under the best of circumstances, how about this? Under optimum conditions, as far as ordinary intelligence will be concerned, and even though all of it remains in the peaceful bosom of reality, where are you going to go? Even though all of that, you should note that without the proper mortal support, the necessary and invented world could not sustain itself. And that's the very things that ordinary people, parts of life's body, can rail, oftentimes in a very logical and reasonable manner, that they will, against which they will rail and about which they will carp, about the foolishness of religion, political ideas, and etc. Once you realize that that is man's world, and that there is no negative connotation from any sane viewpoint about all of this, then you also must realize that this must exist, and it must be supported. And who's going to support it? The primary world's not. Dogs are not. Fish are not. Squirrels are not. There's only one group of people that's going to support this. The old man said, do not too hastily attack the literary, which is the secondary muses, because he did not give any sort of credit to Pogo, I don't guess, but he said that he had been to the higher levels in the city and he had met the poets. And the poets are us. Yes, the imaginary world, the world that does not have anything to do by God, I'm speaking for ordinary reality, the world that does not have anything to do with just everyday solid affairs, food, property, sex, health. The rest of that stuff is just insanity. The rest of that stuff is just folly. Of course, those kind of people probably wouldn't say folly. But they'd say that's just ridiculous. Part of what we brought up, at least put a semicolon there. The last time in the listing about having to do with non-tangibles is considering the widest possible scope. Your civilized responsibilities. That could be summed up in saying that man invents non-tangibles. It's therefore man who must defend and protect them. When I say non-tangibles, you understand I was going to get more specific, but we're running out. But we're just talking about what could be, you can find your own, the specifics out in the secondary world. This invented world vis-a-vis the tangible, physical, unaffected, inalterable, physical, primary world. Compared to that, the secondary world is invented. It grows from that. Within that is where man invents, man produces all of the non-tangibles. Religion, politics, hobbies, everything that is not one of the three S's without any adjectives. If it's not eating, screwing, or sleeping, getting in and out of the weather, then everything else is invented. Everything else is the secondary world. Everything else is a non-tangible. But you've got to see there's a kind of responsibility to parenthood. It's man who creates, invents the non-tangibles, and it's only he who can defend and protect them. And it is, rather than it being any form of attack, which all forms of attack at that level, you got to remember, is you saying, wait a minute, I'll admit the world is big, but it ain't big enough for that son of a bitch. It ain't big enough for that group of people. It's not big enough for that idea. No. Contrary to that, man being the sole, the only possible defender and protector of the non-tangibles which he invented, it is an extreme example of what in the city many people like to refer to as rational self-interest. It's the extreme, it is the, or supreme, how about, example. For if the unnecessary, if the uncertain world of man's mind, for all the uncertainties and all the invented imaginary aspects of man's world, the secondary world, should in some way trip and fall, then I got to tell you, you're in for a spill that you don't even want to hear about. So the very things that the ordinary mind at any given time on that polarized dance floor, that life has parts of the people pointing at half the other people on the dance floor and saying, God, you people can't dance. You know, either that, or this ballroom ain't big enough for both of us. Or, boy, your feet stink. Or, boy, I can tell by the way you dance, you don't believe in God. Or you don't believe in Buddha. Or I can tell from the way you dance, you've got to be a Marxist. Half of them are always, the dance wouldn't continue, right? The very things that everyone criticizes for, the movement of energy is all it is, but those very things. I'm saying, well, there's some things that are indefensible. These other people, my ideas, my secondary world, of course, I say me, and you step back internally, me and my kin. That is, all an ordinary man thinks is collective thoughts. So it's me and the other Catholics, me and the other Italians, me and the other Jews, me and the other whatever. Our ideas are decent, reasonable. The world is plenty big for us. Our intangibles, our non-tangibles. Other people's non-tangibles not only do not deserve protecting, they should be eradicated. They should be changed. They should be altered. The rational self-interest involved is every group does that. The secondary world looks after its own. For the third time, I'll go ahead and say it. None of you have done it. When I say the secondary world looks after its own, I'm sure the first time, most of you thought, well, oh yeah, us. The secondary world looks after its own. That is, itself. if indeed the kind of internal critiquing, which is a movement of energy, of half the people on the dance floor criticizing the other half, not physically, not at the primary level, they can, but that's of no consequence. Not nowadays. It is the secondary attack that makes the other half have to defend and protect their non-tangibles. This is the supreme example of living self-interest. Because should this arrangement collapse, as I said, you're in for something that you don't even want to hear about. So, I'm not going to say it. Dinah Shore doesn't use that. She's not on anymore. I can do it. That means that's